Before we get to today's episode, some quick housekeeping. Due to the holidays, we'll have a slightly different schedule the next 2 weeks. We'll have an episode next Monday, the 21st, but we won't have any episodes on Christmas Eve, December the 28th, and New Year's Eve. For more details, see the pinned tweet on our Twitter account. Now to today's episode. Back in 1956, Gabriel Hanot, the chief football writer for the magazine France Football, asked colleagues from across Europe to vote for their Player of the Year.
What a great reception he gets from all at Wembley as the whistle goes. Matthews in his third cup final is the hero of the day.
By the time the numbers had been counted up, Blackpool's Stanley Matthews had narrowly beaten Real Madrid's Alfredo Di Stefano by 3 votes. Fast forward 70 years and that award, the Ballon d'Or, is still celebrated year on year, voted for by journalists from around the world.
The Ballon d'Or France Football 2019 is Mr. Lionel Messi.
But with the coronavirus pandemic raging on, the 2020 iteration of the Ballon d'Or has been cancelled.
Lionel Messi will remain the Ballon d'Or title holder for 1 additional year. For the first time since the trophy began being awarded in 1956, there will be no Ballon d'Or winner this year because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Without the glitz and glamour of the awards ceremony to dazzle us, in this episode we ask, do we still need the Ballon d'Or in 2020?
It's an award that is given to the best performing male footballer over the course of a calendar year.
Sam Tighe is a football journalist who can be found on Bleacher Report and the Ranks FC podcast.
It's handed out in December, so you get 11 months worth of scrutiny and judgment over multiple competitions, club and country, and we vote to declare a winner.
So let's start at the very beginning. How did the Ballon d'Or come into existence?
So the Ballon d'Or is an annual football award presented by a French news magazine called France Football. It's one of the oldest and generally regarded as one of the most prestigious individual awards for a footballer. And I'd say it's taken on increased significance during the Messi-Ronaldo era or over the last 10 years or so.
En 1956, alors joueur de Blackpool et âgé de 41 ans, Stanley Matthews remporte le trophée devant les légendes de l'époque Alfredo Di Stefano, lauréat l'année suivante, et le français Raymond Coppa.
The first award was given to Stanley Matthews in 1956, who narrowly beat off competition from Alfredo Di Stefano. Since then, the awards had a number of prestigious winners. Is there any that stand out to you in particular?
Obviously, the recent conversation has been about Messi and Ronaldo. There are the anomalies, like Lev Yashin being the only goalkeeper ever to win it and Fabio Cannavaro being the last defender to win it back in 2006. We've seen George Weah as the only African to win the award and the original Ronaldo, R9, as the first South American. So we've seen the award flit about a bit. But yeah, recently over the last 10 years, it's been a familiar story for the most part.
And in the modern history of the Ballon d'Or, the competition went through a little bit of an upheaval in the 2010s. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so between 2010 and 2015, the award merged with a similar one, which was the FIFA World Player of the Year award, to create the FIFA Ballon d'Or, before FIFA and France Football decided not to continue merging their agreement.
So let's talk about the voting system then. What does the Ballon d'Or vote look like?
So the votes are cast through France Football, the magazine, and essentially a journalist or a broadcaster, sometimes one, sometimes a couple, from each of the 176 voting nations. They all get a vote and they all select a top 5 from a 30-man shortlist as it currently stands. So the top pick gets 5 points, and the last pick, number 5, gets 1 point, and it descends from there.
This one vote per FIFA nation leads to some Eurovision Song Contest style politicking, doesn't it?
I mean, I guess so. Certain regions are quite proud of the players that they've produced, you know, with African nations voting for Sadio Mane quite heavily. And him into second place behind Messi at one stage, and Van Dijk seemed to emerge as a top pick across Europe and Asia. Messi dominates sometimes in Africa, in North Africa, definitely in South America as well. So yeah, you do tend to see some regions and some continents voting for their own products, if you will, because they're proud of them. I guess sometimes that calls the legitimacy of the voting process into question, because that is, by its very nature, favoritism.
I was curious because we shared this stage 15 years, me and him. I don't know if it's ever happened in football. The same two guys in the same stage all the time.
Yeah. You've mentioned it a few times. It would be remiss of us to talk about the history of the Ballon d'Or without talking about Messi and Ronaldo and the rivalry between them. How do you think that rivalry has impacted the award?
Well, it's made it a bit of a two-man show at parts, although we might finally be at the end of that. I say finally. Obviously, Messi has won 6 and Ronaldo has won 5. So it really has been a long time with just Luka Modric winning any of the Ballon d'Ors in between Messi and Ronaldo over the last 11 years or so. I mean, it's transformed the Ballon d'Or almost directly into a Messi v Ronaldo rivalry, which was already pretty strong to start with. And it's dominated a lot of the discourse surrounding both of these players' careers. And it's almost given fans an opportunity to weigh one of them against the other by how many Ballon d'Ors they've won. That seems to be quite an important level of credence for each player in that argument.
The 2020 iteration of the award was due to take place last week until it was cancelled due to the coronavirus pandemic. Do you think it would have been the same old story with Messi or Ronaldo picking up the award, or would we have seen someone else, do you think?
Well, if social media is anything to go by, I don't think it would have been the same old story at all. I think we probably would have seen Robert Lewandowski of Bayern Munich crowned Ballon d'Or winner after a phenomenal season personally and for his club Bayern Munich.
People are angry, Louis. People are angry. They are angry for you when the announcement was made that they cancelled the Ballon d'Or, because so many people around the world said that you deserved it, that this was your award.
He won the treble, then he won the European Super Cup. He scored a truckload of goals and he picked up all of the club medals that you would probably need in the grand scheme to be worth winning the Ballon d'Or. And it's coincided with a slight dip for Messi and Ronaldo, which helps. But Lewandowski was the standout candidate, in my opinion, this year. And what I see on Twitter definitely backs that up.
So is this just a pandemic-dependent blip, or will the Ballon d'Or be back again next year?
Yeah, I think we'll see it back. I don't really understand why it wasn't held in the first place, to be honest with you. I mean, the reasoning given by France Football, I didn't really accept. They said it wasn't a normal year of football, so they're not going to give out an award. Well, no, it wasn't a normal year at all in any sphere, but an awful lot of football was played. And the only football that wasn't played that was supposed to be played was the international tournaments. That's still more than enough to go on. All of the domestic leagues, except for the Netherlands and France at the top level in Europe, finished. And of course, the Champions League managed to complete itself over in Lisbon as well in an exciting format. So that is more than enough football at the top level to crown a Ballon d'Or winner. I am very confused as to why there wasn't one this year. So yes, I expect it to come back next year.
Are you a fan of football today? Why not support the show and sign up to our new Patreon page? You'll get access to bonus episodes, full and unedited interviews, and lots more extra content. To join us, just visit patreon.com and search for Football Today. Now back to today's episode. You've been to a couple of Ballon d'Or award ceremonies. What was the experience like?
Well, I had two very different experiences. In 2018, I sat in the audience and I watched Luka Modric accept his award and celebrate with his family. And I covered the event for BR Football's Instagram story. So I got relatively free roam. I got to the red carpet. I was in the auditorium. I was in amongst the drinks and the canapes afterwards. And it was nice. It was glamorous. It was glitzy. It was decadent. I'd say actually those words probably don't even quite do it justice. I've never seen chandeliers like it. And then in 2019, I went as standard media, and that's not a great experience. It's pack journalism, it's behind a rope, it's clamouring for content in a cordoned off basement area somewhere. I interviewed Van Dijk and De Ligt, and that sounds amazing, but the reality of those evenings is quite grim sometimes as a journalist. To be honest with you, having been to one of the ceremonies now and seen how wonderful it is, there's a big part of me that thinks that France football just cancelled this year's Ballon d'Or because they couldn't have their ceremony due to the coronavirus pandemic and social restrictions. And they may have thought, well, if there's no glitzy ceremony in the middle of Paris, then what's the point in awarding this thing at all? I worry about that because that means that Robin Lewandowski has been robbed.
You've been quite forthright in your criticisms of the Ballon d'Or. What would you say the main lines of your arguments against it are?
Well, my major issue with the Ballon d'Or is the time frame it is judged within. It makes no sense whatsoever to do it on a calendar year basis. But I do have other issues as well. The fact that it is essentially a popularity contest kind of bugs me. The fact that it hugely favours attacking players in most years. The fact that the voting patterns can look a little bit odd sometimes. And to be honest with you, the very identity of the voters that decide it all in the first place, I think can be called into question at times. So it'd be fair to say I'm not that enamoured with quite a lot of this award.
So you mentioned there that you don't like the time frame that the Ballon d'Or operates within. Could you just expand on that?
Yeah, so European football hosts the world's best talents. And so that means that Europe's top leagues are hosting the best talents. And we're picking Ballon d'Or winners from those leagues. Those leagues run from around August to around May. They split 2 calendar years. So I don't know why you would hold the Ballon d'Or, the most prestigious individual trophy on offer, as a time frame of judgment. Why would you perform it over a whole calendar year? Why would you judge performances over the back half of one season, a summer tournament in the middle, and the first, let's say, 3 months of the next season? Because this award is given out at the start of December, so you can get rid of December as well. You should just award it at the end of a campaign or at the end of the summer international tournaments in August when it comes to a close. I think one of the biggest issues when it comes to debating this subject is that a lot of people don't even realise that it's a calendar year award, and they quote season stats rather than calendar year stats. It's very difficult to quantify these things. It doesn't make much sense to me at all.
Another issue that you mentioned there seems to be the voting system that is used to decide the eventual winner. Do you think that the fact that the award is voted for by single journalists or broadcasters from each FIFA jurisdiction ends up having a negative impact on the result?
If the Ballon d'Or is to be regarded as sacred and one of the most, or perhaps the most important individual award on offer, then I think the journalists voting are probably, with respect, unqualified to vote on it, because I'm not expecting every major journalist in every country to be watching, the top 30 or 40 players supposedly in contention like a hawk every week to check who has actually been better. They're going to work off narratives. They're going to work off hearsay. And as I referenced before, some of these voting patterns are very, very strange. Without wanting to just pick on one guy, but just use an example of Hafiz Marakar, who works for a Sri Lankan newspaper. In 2017, he gave his top vote to Leonardo Bonucci. In 2018, Eden Hazard. And in 2019, Trent Alexander-Arnold, with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in second place that year. It is a game of opinions, but I don't really understand what is happening there. I think there needs to be a more concise shortlist of players to pick from. I think 30 people is way too many, and they should limit it to 5 or maybe 10. But in my experience, writing about the Ballon d'Or, working for Bleacher Report, and tallying up who the best players have been, there are never more than 3 or 5 legitimate candidates anyway. So to create a long list of 30, it just confuses matters.
One of the age-old criticisms of the Ballon d'Or is that it can be re-awarded to players year after year, and we've already talked about how Messi and Ronaldo went through a phase of just handing the award back and forth between each other. Do you think that the award would be improved if it could only be awarded once in a person's lifetime?
To be honest, that I don't have an issue with at all. If Messi or Ronaldo is the best player once again, then it's probably fair enough, and it speaks to their relentless levels of excellence and their dedication to the sport and to high performance. And I think that should be rewarded. Ultimately, there is an argument that the Ballon d'Or should just go to the best player in the world every year. Rather than judging their entire performance level over the course of a year, you just pick who you think the best one is, and then you give him the big golden globe. For my money, that would be Messi, 11 years in a row. So not allowing it to go to more than one person probably doesn't tally up with that.
Patrick Vieira had the ball in midfield. He passed it into Thierry, who was 25, 30 yards out. Thierry flicked the ball up over the West Ham defender, who I think was Christian Daly, and hit it with an unstoppable half volley past the West Ham goalkeeper David James into the top corner.
I suppose one of the advantages of only giving the award once in a player's lifetime would be that there would be more winners of the award. Do you think greater inclusivity would have made the award better if players like Thierry Henry or Samuel Eto'o or Xavi could be inducted into the Ballon d'Or Hall of Fame? Would it be more credible for you?
I do like the idea of a kind of lifetime award or a Hall of Fame. They've recently done a sort of best 11, but an individual Ballon d'Or award awarded retrospectively for some of the best we've seen, I would like. So Henry, Eto'o and Xavi are good examples, and I'd add Andres Iniesta, Paolo Maldini, and probably Francesco Totti as three more that I would say, for different reasons, probably deserve to be recognised in some fashion with this kind of award. Iniesta for his excellence levels, Maldini for his longevity, and Totti because he stayed at one club. I think there's more than one reason to reward a player in these circumstances with a prestigious award. So I like that kind of idea, although I wouldn't want it to tread on the idea of a player not being able to be given it twice, because that excellence does need to be rewarded.
The prestigious Ballon d'Or award has been won by Fabio Cannavaro. The Real Madrid defender who led Italy to World Cup victory last summer was crowned the top player to become only the third defender to win the game's biggest prize.
You've already mentioned this, but clearly there is a bias against defensive players and towards attacking players in the Ballon d'Or. Does lumping all players into the same pot raise questions about the usefulness of the Ballon d'Or to start with?
Well, it's just very difficult for a defender to win it, I'd say, because it's much more difficult to quantify why they've been so good. You can't use goal and assist tallies, basic metrics, but effective, I guess, to quantify how well they've done. And for them to win, the narrative needs to be incredibly strong. So you take a look at Cannavaro in 2006. He's a World Cup winning captain. He's a Real Madrid player. Even Van Dijk couldn't win it in 2019. That's just how hard it is for a player in that position to get into winning territory. Now, they've recently introduced a goalkeeper-specific award, which is a step in the right direction. I wouldn't like to see it split anymore. Goalkeepers are very clearly different players to outfielders. It's an entirely different skill set and position group. I mean, they can use their hands, so they're very, very different. So separating goalkeepers, I think, is fair enough. But I don't know if you can separate the defensive players from the midfielders from the attackers. And whoever has to draw those lines and define who is a midfielder and who is an attacker, well, good luck to that person.
I suppose all of these questions point to a more fundamental question, which is the problem here that we're trying to pick out the best from a group of entirely unalike things? As you've already mentioned, not all footballers are going to score goals, but that doesn't mean to say that the best defender shouldn't be considered to be perhaps the best player in the world. Do you think the Ballon d'Or fails because it doesn't really have more tangible criteria?
Well, the commonly accepted logic in football is that scoring a goal is the hardest part of the game. That's a rhetoric that gets repeated by managers all over the place, and therefore it's probably true. So it conditions us to think of strikers and attackers and creative players and to champion them when talking about who the best players in the world are. So if we accept those conditions, we naturally prioritise those kind of players. And it's very difficult to judge different profiles of players, different position groups, across clubs, across countries, across multiple competitions. And judging them across two halves of two different seasons makes it even more ridiculous. So yes, the criteria is weak. It might be better just to decide, well, who is the best player in the world? Rather than measure it intrinsically over performance over the course of the year, just ask yourself a very simple question. Who's the best player in the world? And whatever your answer is your vote for the Ballon d'Or that year.
So do you think that's the solution to the problem then?
Well, I'm sure everyone has a suggestion for this, but what I would propose is basically something akin to the FIFA and UEFA technical committees that they use to judge under 17, under 18, 19, under 20 tournaments, the Euros, the World Cups, the youth tournaments. I'm a keen watcher of those. And I always look out for the technical group's tournament reports because they watch every player properly. They watch the tournament in its entirety. They judge, they analyse, and they produce very good material on who has excelled. Now, of course, a youth tournament is a small sample size. It's more controlled, and I understand it's harder to bring that into a bigger sphere. But the tenets of it are very simple. It's a group of qualified people watching a group of players very closely, accurately recording the events, and deciding who's great and who's not. And as I've said, when it comes to the Ballon d'Or, over the course of a year, you're really only ever looking at somewhere between 3 and 5 legitimate candidates for this award. You know what? For the last 10 years, it's really only ever been between 2. But let's say it's between 3 and 5. An appointed group that would pore over those players in contention and take a look at what they've done over the year and make an informed judgment on it, that might be a better start than handing 174 nations, newspaper writers, one single vote. on a subject they, to be fair, probably can't keep track of because it's impossible.
So do we still need the Ballon d'Or in the 21st century?
Well, I think there'd be a riot if we cancelled it. It is seemingly 60% of what is talked about on football Twitter. It is a borderline toxic subject, and I think if we tried to take it away, there might be a world war. So as a staple of conversation, as a frame of conversation, it's important. As I said, people are directly measuring players' brilliance and players' legacies based on how many Ballon d'Ors they won. So we need it. And we probably just need to perform a bit of surgery to make it work better. I don't think we should scrap it.
Sam Tighe is a football journalist who can be heard regularly on the Ranks FC podcast. The music for this episode is provided under the Creative Commons license by Blue.Sessions, and the details for the individual songs can be found in the show notes. This episode was produced by myself and Josh Schneiderweiler. I'm John Mackenzie. Thanks for listening to Football Today.